So, Paul, do you want to just start off and tell the audience a little bit about your career?
Sure. Well, good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to be here today. I started cooking when I was 20. I dropped out of college and moved to the French Quarter in New Orleans. And you're either a bartender, a waiter, or a cook down there. And I started waiting tables, and next thing you know, I was in the kitchen. And it was just something that I really excelled at. And spent a number of years down there cooking in the Quarter at a few restaurants, and then went to culinary school up in Canada, cooked in Chicago for a few years, and then got a great opportunity to be a chef at Kraft Foods developing retail products. And I did that for about 10 years. And that was just a wonderful opportunity to learn, the food science aspect of the culinary. And I really learned a lot, and I really enjoyed it, and I never thought I would. But I developed a CPK frozen pizza line, and that's where I met Rick and Larry and my boss, Brian Sullivan. And one day the phone rang, and they called me up and offered me a job in California to work for them directly. So now I'm in charge of the restaurant menu with Brian Sullivan, as well as our franchise partners around the world and our frozen pizza business with Nestle. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Amy?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Amy Myrdal Miller, and I'm a farmer's daughter from North Dakota. When I was in high school, I told my mom I wanted to go to culinary school, and she said no, get a 4-year degree like your siblings. So I begrudgingly went off and got an undergraduate degree in nutrition, but during that time I cooked at a fraternity house and realized maybe the culinary world wasn't for me. That was probably one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. And I became a registered dietitian and did not want to stand over people's hospital beds telling them what they should have eaten 30, 40 years ago to avoid cardiovascular disease or other significant health outcomes. So I went on and got a master's degree in nutrition marketing. I worked in PR for a while. I didn't believe what we were telling people about products based on the research, so then I went and did clinical research, and using humans as research subjects is really hard because nobody wants to do what the research protocol calls for. So I left that job and went to work for Dole Food Company, one of the best jobs I've ever had. Loved working for Dole, working in the produce industry. My focus there was working with elementary school teachers across the country to encourage kids to eat more produce and to be the nag factor to get their families to eat more produce. But that was very much based on nutrition and health. From there I moved on to the Culinary Institute of America, and that was where the shift happened for me, that we can't get people to eat better unless we talk to them about flavor. So Jerry, kudos to you on your presentation. I mean, umami and small amounts of animal-based or marine-based protein as a strategy to get people to eat more vegetables is a winning strategy. And I hope all of the culinary students in the room here today really think about flavor first, then the beauty of the presentation on the plate. And a lot of what Jerry presented might be a little esoteric if you're thinking about a future in the chain restaurant industry, but the flavor development strategies aren't. So folks like Paul and others who are thinking about broad scale, what's that flavor experience that we're going to deliver that pushes more produce in all forms to the consumer is really, really important to this industry as well as to public health. And today I run a consulting business and work with glorious clients on these issues on a daily basis. So thanks for inviting me, Ellen.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Ellen, thank you for the invite. I'm honored to be here for the simple reason that my culinary career started in Italy, where I think as a culture, vegetables is always the king of the plate. You're talking to your parents, you talk to your mom, and they always tell you, eat this because it's good for you, and they have all the different capability to cure any sickness in general. But most important, my career in Italy, as it started, was as a pastry chef on my uncle's side, making coffee for my other uncle, and my father was a baker. So as I turned around into the United States after working in hotels, working in Italian restaurants and so forth, I landed at Starbucks, which basically that's where I started my career. Nowadays, I'm very excited about the opportunity with Starbucks because we are moving into the direction of food directly from Italy, organic food. In the next couple of years, you will see there is a tremendous innovation on the food part. And I would say 90% of our menu has got to be vegetarians and organic. So I'm happy to see this evolution here in the United States, but I'm also looking forward for your help to produce the vegetables and produce that we are going to be looking for. Products that are outstanding, not just in the look. Products that are great in terms of flavors, they're fresh, and they grow close to us. And thank you.
Rafi?
Yes. My name is Rafi Taherian. I was born in Iran and studied urban planning in Italy, actually, in Venice. And about 30-some years ago, in '86 actually, I migrated to the United States. And my culinary journey actually goes from owning a restaurant, not doing well, working for Marriott, doing well, going to Culinary Institute of America to learn culinary skills, working for Culinary Institute of America, and working for Stanford University in Palo Alto, and finally at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. For those that they know me in the industry, I'm extremely passionate about produce. I'm an advocate, actually, for produce industry, but I'm also a very friendly reminder of the produce industry that quality is extremely important to us, and the way they can help us is by improving quality of the produce furthermore in U.S. This is a huge opportunity for us because, as Jerry was saying, we are at the point where there's a huge shift is happening in American diet, and we can play a significant role in this process. So I'm very, very excited to be here. I always look forward to this type of opportunity, learning and sharing ideas from my colleagues. Those that actually, I work with this group for many years. I'm among friends in here, actually, on this podium. Thank you for having me.
And I'm Maeve Webster with Menu Matters. I actually started off what was going to be my career in acting in New York. And as with all good actors, the question is always, what restaurant? And I actually did not work in the restaurant, but I decided to date a chef. And I have to say, he did completely change the way I looked at food preparation, what I was eating, and how to approach it. I ended up going back for my MBA in Chicago and then started in food consulting. Did that about 15 years ago is when I got into the industry. A few years after getting into food consulting, I actually went back for my culinary degree at a Le Cordon Bleu program in Chicago and have been using that as well as my experience in the industry to work with manufacturers and national accounts to really understand consumer behavior. I completely agree with Rafi. There are seismic shifts in the way consumers are approaching food. And it's not just a millennial or Gen Z issue, it's really a complete change in the way people are looking at what they're eating, when they're eating it, how they're interacting with the industry. I think there's no way to understate those changes and how they'll affect the way the industry on every level will approach food preparation and food products. So I think it's a really exciting time. The other thing that I think is so important to keep in mind is how fast these trends are now coming and going. And Jerry brought up a good point. It's not that they go, right, but they slow down and then all of a sudden everybody starts focusing on something else. They don't disappear, it's just that the focus starts shifting. But the cycle has, halved. It used to be 20 years, you could kind of jump on a trend and you'd still be okay. Now it's like 5 years. So it's really hard to stay on top of all of this. But very excited to be here. Like Rafi said, I've worked with all these people, I think, except for Paul, so it's very nice to meet you. And thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. So the first question is for the operators. When it comes to consumer trend information, where do you get it? How do you use it? And how does that show up on menus?
So I'll
Okay,
start with
great.
that. So basically what we do is we'll come up with a bunch of concepts. We don't do so much research with trend companies, but when we're doing some bigger items for our menu, we will definitely look into it. We basically come up with a laundry list of items, and then we kind of test those online with our consumers. Some of them are our consumers, some of them aren't. And then those ideas that come out to the top, then we start to develop those and create the dish. That way we can kind of carpet bomb the area and put as many ideas out there as possible. Our restaurant is one menu across the country, so when we're looking for something for the menu, we have to make sure that it fits in the Midwest as well as the East Coast and the West Coast. So once we do have some ideas that we think that work, and we have created those dishes, then we'll show them to our guests, or we'll test them in our restaurants across the country. So
You do about 6 restaurants?
about 6 restaurants, and we like to do it, we like to spread it all out. So a few years ago, we actually wanted to kind of build a library to draw from, and in 1 year we tested, I think, over 50 items throughout our restaurants. So
It's ambitious. Stefano?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, being a global company, we do an extensive research on the consumers. In particular, is to how they use the vegetable. I mean, in this case, and we look at colors. We're looking of elements of the vegetables that marry, in particular for us, with the coffee experience. Now, the coffee experience means we're looking for flavor for vegetables and produce and grains that grow next to our tropical line of the coffees. So the florals are very important. When we ideated salads or even dish in general, we're looking for anything that elevated the experience of the coffee. In addition to that, how do we nourish our customers, and in particular our employees? I mean, we feed 250,000 employees every day, and we probably serve between 16, 17 million meals a day on food. So we take into consideration what we do. How do we buying the vegetables, produce, and grains in a sustainable way? So all this takes a lot of work, especially when it's a mantra for our company, because we affect the health, but also the health of the natures. We could in a very poor way if we don't do that. But it's fun. It's fun. I mean, a lot of the knowledge that we acquire is mostly from our farmers as we go to research the most difficult coffee to be grown, but we eat in the same place that they eat, and we look for those flavors for the food that they have, the colors, which is very, very important. I think that's the constant work. I mean, Starbucks now only has 8,000 stores in the United States, but we have 28,000 stores around the world, so it is no longer at the center of our culinary is California. California, I think, represents the epitome of what's fresh, what's great, because at the end of the day, we're still an American company, but it's also the evolution of taking everything that's the best from the world and bring it into one state and be able to mantras around the world.
Well, I have miserably failed to convince our budget office that we too need to have the kind of budget that Jerry has to go around the country 3 weeks and eat in 100 different restaurants. In the absence of that, we rely on people like me.
Happily.
And so we don't consider ourselves trend chasers. We actually rather to look at studies that focuses on behaviors, demographic behaviors, because we work constantly with the latest generation. We are in the 18 to 22, and actually if you add graduate students and postgraduate studies, 18 to 29 sometimes demographic. And these are a group of people that they are forward trendsetters in the industry. And so it's very difficult for us to just look at the restaurants and see what is happening in casual dining. We rely on the really deep studies that companies like The Essential, Technomic, or experts in the industry like Maeve, they do. They're focusing on consumer demographics, and they're looking at the trends not on the annual basis, but on the segment basis. It takes, a substantial amount of time for us to focus and target, our facilities and our operations. We want to make sure that we're doing the right thing and forward thinking in terms of trends.
So for Maeve and Amy, can you just talk a little bit about the difference in the way people consume produce at home versus in restaurants?
You want to go first?
I'll jump in there. Yeah. Gosh, okay, big question. One of the biggest challenges to getting people to cook with produce at home is what's their level of culinary confidence and competence, and what are their time pressures, and what are their beliefs about how a produce item comes to them. Do they believe that green beans in one of those steam fresh bags that you can pop in the microwave are as good for you as green beans that are in the bulk bin in the produce section? And there's a lot of, consumer beliefs that fresh is best, and here we are, #celebrating fresh, but from the dietitian's perspective, we want people to eat fruits and vegetables in all forms, and we want them to eat more of it. End of story. Doesn't matter if it's conventional, organic, juice, dried, packaged, all the research supports the more produce you're getting in your diet, the better off you're gonna be, particularly for heart disease. But now we're dealing with consumers who think fresh is best, and if I don't have the time to prep it, to cut it, to chop it, or if I buy it and I put it in the produce drawer and a week later I open that and I've wasted my money because the quality is no longer there, then they kind of give up. So home is very different. Now in the restaurant, it depends who they're dining with, what's the time of day, what their mood state is. There's research about women who eat with their girlfriends and they're having some wine, and if conversation goes in the direction of frustration with marriage, job, whatnot, they'll drink wine and they'll eat more comfort food, versus someone in the group says, I'm striving, I'm on a diet, I just joined Weight Watchers, and the mindset shifts to, okay, she's watching it, so I better watch it and be better behaved in this environment. But I think, if you hear something on social media about somebody's really excited about a concept like what Jerry presented, you create this social media dynamic where people are going to get more excited about that and go, well, my girlfriend who's very hip on dining tried that veg-centric item, I'm going to try that the next time I'm out. A lot of different dynamics.
No, I think you're right. I think the biggest difference between at home and away from home is at home tends to be very familiar based, very kind of habitual based, very I guess standard in a lot of ways, and a lot of it does have to do with time, skill levels, comfort. Now that being said, you have a lot of companies like HelloFresh, Blue Apron, Green Blender that are helping to open up the market to less common or less familiar produce and get people to feel comfortable with how to prepare it and what to do with it and how is it going to taste and look. At restaurants, however, of course, consumers will experiment more. Now, obviously, that's going to vary by consumer and demographics and all that, but the consumers can put their faith in the chef that they know how to present this and prepare it, and it's less of a commitment, and Amy, you touched on this, it's less of a commitment to buy one dish that you may or may not like at a restaurant, but you're willing to try it, than to buy a whole something and bring it home, like a whole turnip or squash or whatever, that might rot out in the produce bin of your refrigerator, and then you've wasted all that money and you haven't even had a chance to do anything with it. So I think there's a certain willingness to, kind of expand your comfort zone at a restaurant that you don't necessarily have at home.
This question's for anyone on the panel who wants to take it. But if you could change one thing about the way produce intersects with the food service industry, what would you change? I know, Rafi, you're going to be first. Go.
Oh, I'm dying to answer, but it's not one thing. I think recognition of the fact that food service operates in a very different environment and methodology than retail industry, it's extremely important to us. I think retail industry focus on size, shape, color, and now as recently also taste, is something that we do care about, but we care more about flavor, texture, aroma, the experience actually that produce ultimately produces for our students and for our guests. When I went to culinary school, one of the things that our chefs were hammering into our head was make no harm. When you're approaching food, when you're making food, try not to take away from it, try not to damage it, try to enhance it. But that presumes that you actually begin with really, really high quality product. And in our case, in food service, not necessarily is focused on size, shape, color. In the recent 2-3 years, you see that the ugly vegetables actually is getting a huge footprint in the food service. So a lot of people in my side of the business, in campus dining, now we're looking at how we can leverage, do we need to have the perfect carrot? Not necessarily we chop it, we dice it, we puree it, but do we need to have a very tasty carrot? You betcha, we do. And so understanding and bringing the produce industry to that point where they differentiate the market between us and the retail would be a huge win for us in the food service industry.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in about this because this is going to be important for the next few years, especially for a company, or even started with Compass before, but now with the Starbucks. How do we bring great food, great vegetable in general, in the same way that we built the coffee chain? Because the company is getting bigger, but if you take Compass, Starbucks, McDonald's, so forth, we probably not even reach 10% of the market. Therefore, the market is really geared for retails and not for us. It is geared for beauty and not for flavor. So what I'm thinking of before I get fired is really bring us our menus to the field. In other words, as we planning for the future, and it's happening very fast, right now, is we would like to submit our menus to the growers 2 years ahead so they can grow the vegetables for our industry and not just for the retails. And we're going to need your help for it. But basically, we won't be successful in the long terms until we really provide great products to our customers in such a way that speedy, convenience, as you said, is very difficult to cook vegetables all the time at home because we all constrained with time. You can cook a rutabaga, it takes a long time to cook, so you tend to stick with salads or something that vegetable that cook fast. But more and more people are looking for the flavors of health, and they're looking for us to solve their problems. But it's got to taste good, and in order to taste good, I think we needed to have a contact direct with the growers versus just be part of the retail business.
Food service is going to continue to play a bigger and bigger role in our lives. We're going to, as a society, need more and more convenience, more and more help with food preparation, food management. Today it's estimated that 60% of what we buy is influenced by chefs because of their influence through the supermarket industry as well as the restaurant industry. So to play up what both Rafi and Stefano said, we need to move to better and better flavor. A chef can do a lot to improve the flavor of a dish, but the magic of produce is if you start with something that's incredibly awesome and flavorful, minimal effort is needed, and labor is a huge cost in food service. Right. So let's work together to get to a place where that produce that comes in the back door is exceptional quality and minimal effort, but exceptional talent can make it amazing for the diner every time.
Go ahead, Maeve.
No, sorry, to really just jump off of what you just said, the two things I would say is both to what you're talking about with labor, as well as this whole idea of veg-centric. It's all kind of well and good at the fine dining level where you've got a ton of staff and labor that can handle all this prep. Once that focus and that eating behavior starts to trickle down to fast casual, QSR, who are more limited in their space, their staff, value-added produce options are going to be critical for those operators. So provide, and again, with high quality, great taste, right, that allow them to leverage this trend. There's no way it's going to be possible for them without value added. And to kind of piggyback on Stefano and Rafi about this idea of quality, I'm hearing more and more chefs talking about local is really not the most important thing, and it's in fact been overly stressed above and beyond taste, quality, etc. This focus on quality is going to impact not only what's happening further on in food service, but eventually, to Amy's point about the impact of food service on retail, what people are looking for in the supermarket. Beauty is not going to be the #1 thing eventually. I'm not saying tomorrow or next month, but people are going to start focusing more on the flavor and a lot less on, does this look like the perfect apple?
Yeah, which, interestingly enough, when you think about historically in food service, it was always sort of accepted that the trend started in fine dining and trickled down. But a lot of trends now actually are starting at colleges and universities and other places. Why do you think that's happening, and where else do you think the trends are coming from if it's not fine dining?
Well, I think in our segment, for many years, we learned not to like millennials, primarily because of their behavior. They didn't have brand loyalty. It was all about them. I know what I want. I know when I want it. I know how I want it. I know where I want it, and I want it now. That was their modus operandi. And for years, but this was the generation ultimately that forced us to rethink ourselves in terms of our service delivery. They were so difficult to service to and deliver to, and we had to actually, campus dining had to transform itself in a way that we would have not been able to do it if it wasn't because of the millennials, okay? Now that we're celebrating their exit from our system, and now they become somebody else's problem, okay?
Thanks.
Yeah, it becomes a Stefano's and everybody else in the retail and in the restaurants. They're not in all segments. We are now dealing with Vide, the post-millennials, and they're different than millennials. So this is why the change has happened in campus dining. And today, you name it, attributes that they were very much characteristic of the high-end restaurant. Organic, local, fresh, antibiotic-free, hormone-free, you name it, they're all actually in campus dining. And I think we can be the best incubator for this movement of more produce in the country. We provide actually, because we have high number of the transactions in one location. We are not distributed across the country in 2,000 locations. We have 14,000, 20,000, 50,000 some schools of transactions, meals that they are served in one location, in one area, okay? So we can be an amazing partner, incubator for produce industry to test and create, like you said in here, ideation fresh. We can be an amazing partner for produce industry, and I like to offer our segment for them.
Paul, I had a question for you. When you go to a farmer's market and fall in love with a piece of produce, how do you interpret that, and how do you use that, and how, if any, do you have any examples where that made its way onto a California Pizza Kitchen menu?
Yeah, quite a bit. We're very lucky in California. We've got pretty much all this wonderful produce out there. And a lot of our inspiration definitely comes from California, and we want to share that with everybody across the country and around the world. We have some great local produce markets where we're at, close near LA. And we get a lot of inspiration there. A lot of things, a lot of new items come out of there. For us, when we're creating a dish, all we need is that one ingredient, like a baby turnip, for example. And that ingredient will just, we'll turn it into multiple dishes, a lot of times that do make our menu. And we have a really wonderful relationship with our produce supplier. They have really been phenomenal. We use FreshPoint. And we're always going to these farmers markets, and we're finding these really great, unique items, and we're saying, hey, can we have this? And can you get this for us? And of course, they say, yeah, of course we can get that for you. But the really hard part and the tricky part is, can they get it to all of our restaurants across the country? So, we figured that out a few years ago, and they've been wonderful at that. So, when we work for, when we put new items on the menu, we definitely make sure that we can source it across the country first before we, dive deep into it. But Gary's presentation before us, he's phenomenal. He's so fantastic. But it's really exciting to see what he's seeing out there because there's a lot of similarities to what he's seeing and what we're doing at California Pizza Kitchen. So we have a wonderful seasonal stracciatella and wild mushroom pasta that's featuring maitake mushrooms. That's on our menu. We're using watermelon radishes on our menu too in some of our power bowls in a few of our restaurants. And all of this comes out of those produce markets in California. So, and again, I gotta put it out there to FreshPoint. They're wonderful. They really work hard for us. And it's hard for us to get one particular item. We want to do seasonality across the country and in all of our restaurants, but it's hard to source that one item in every restaurant. So what we've done is we've said to our restaurants, hey, we're going to give you a handful of different mushrooms, and you pick the one that you can source the easiest in your location, and that will become our seasonal mushroom. So that's how we've been doing it, and that's really kind of been a great partnership with our produce company.
Maeve, food service is a $783 billion industry. Do you think what is your sense about the produce industry? Do you think it feels it's a vital part of the restaurant industry? And if not, what would it take?
Oh, I think unquestionably is a vital part of the industry, and to what we've all been talking about up here and what Jerry talked about, it's becoming more and more vital. There's no way to really stress enough the role of produce at this point in innovation in the food service industry. It's not that Americans are becoming vegetarians or vegans, but they are more focused on it for a whole host of reasons. You've got ethnic cuisines or world cuisines that have been veg-centric for centuries. I mean, veg-centric is our term, their term is simply food, right, it's dinner. Where vegetables are the focus and protein is the garnish for a whole host of reasons. You've got shifts in behavior and you've got a blurring of all these segments, right? To be honest with you, at some point, all the segments we're talking about, fine dining, casual dining, QSR, they're gonna become relatively irrelevant, I think, the way the industry is going. And produce is helping to spur a lot of those changes in the way these new operators are coming up and rethinking it. So, yeah, I think unquestionably produce is critical and will be more and more critical as we move forward.
Stefano, Starbucks, it's known for its coffee ambiance and culture of service. How are you going to make produce front and center at Starbucks?
Little by little. Not really, actually. We've been planning for the last couple of years, and finally I can talk about it because Howard, just the last couple of days, announced our project for the next 5 years, which he spearheaded himself. Well, we do all the work. Basically, he breaks all the walls to do the work. And and for the first time in 40 years at Starbucks, he says, we are building restaurants. And we're actually building kitchens. We're making fresh food we're making fresh fruit in general. And we open up commissaries to produce fresh food all around the world. We're building one in Shanghai. We're going to build the one in New York. We're going to build the one in Seattle. We're going to build in multiple cities that he will announce on a monthly basis as he travels around the world. But basically, we are committed on the flavor of food. We are committed, and obviously, it's going to be mostly Italian food, believe it or not, which means it's 80% vegetables. As Meg said, we perceive general animal protein as a luxury, for flavoring. We don't have the culture of 28 pounds of meat on the plate, but we celebrate the season in general. We celebrate the colors. But vegetables basically, and produce in general, so fruit, are very part of the diet. It's the flavor of health. I mean, it makes you feel good. It makes you feel colorful. You know, my mom, she only went to the 2nd grade, but she can tell you everything that's good for you. Eat the chicory is good for your blood. This is for your iron. Have the lentils, and you know. But after 40 years, you start to realize that she was right. So I'm very excited about this. It's happening. It's happening very, very fast. You will see a big, big change coming up in the next few months, and in the next 4 or 5 years, Starbucks will be coffee-centric, but with a great food that goes at the same level as the coffee experience.
Great. Rafi, you have a lot of ties to culinary schools. Is it still, is it changing at all that the curricula concentrates so much on animal protein in terms of training versus produce? And do you see any shift in the future on that?
Yes, yes, and yes. So there is a shift, I thought with that, in terms of how culinary schools they train and teach, and also research plant-based protein applications, plant-forward menu or plant-centric menu process. The problem is, though, we started late on this. You know, we started 6 years ago, 7 years ago, probably in the industry. There are, you know, I have a slide in one of my presentations. There are 10 different areas why this is not happening as fast as we wish would be happening. One is a lot of people actually they think produce is easy. Produce requires more skills than actually meat. Meat, you put it on the grill or you put it in the oven and you spice it up and you're done with it. Produce, you actually have to understand what are you dealing, what's the water density, what's the texture of this, and colors, and all sorts of other learning that is not inherent in culinary teaching in our today's schools. Produce takes actually more labor, as Maeve was saying earlier, because you have to work with it. And guess what? In the kitchens, who is the lowest classification in terms of brigade in hierarchy in the kitchen? Is entremetier. It's the guy that works on vegetable, you know. And so saucier is actually the high guy. The guy that works with the meat, or the person that works with the meat is the high person, and entremetier is the lowest person. That has to be transforming itself. The wage structure actually in the kitchen has to change, and we have to do something different with it. There's a meat anxiety disorder that somebody has to find the right medicine for it. That people, if they don't eat meat, they think they did not eat, you know, and that actually drives some of, you know, the focusedness of the culinary training and culinary. So in retrospect, it is happening, and it's happening in all those areas that you said. I don't think it's happening fast enough to respond to this huge transformation that we are experiencing today. I think, you know, both millennials and post-millennials are forward trend-setting generations, and they eat meat, but they're not necessarily crazy about it because of, be it environmental issues, health and wellness issues, ethical issues, whatever those issues are, is no longer like it used to be. So we need to work fast on this, and culinary schools, they really need to ramp up their know-hows of how to teach working with vegetable cookery.
You think that'll happen?
Oh, absolutely. Otherwise, they're basically putting themselves out of the business. You know, you saw Jerry's presentation. These chefs that they're working in casual dining, they really rely on people that they're coming into their kitchens, that they know, they understand actually what is a flavor profile and characteristic of produce needs to be. Sadly enough, we have changed this in the last 10, 15 years a good melon is hard to find, you know. Good, really melon that has amazing flavor profile, it's very, very difficult to get. We're getting accustomed to have crunchy melons and crunchy, and the students that they come from culinary schools, they need to be able to understand these things before they go to these restaurants that they do vegetable cookeries, like the one Jerry showed.
Amy, what advice would you give to restaurant operators who want to introduce a not so familiar produce item to the menu?
Great question, Ellen. How do you bring people along with an unfamiliar item? Naming is really important. We Americans don't like words that we can't pronounce. We shy away from that, so find a name that seems familiar. Have a tag-along ingredient buddy. Everybody loves bacon, right? And that's a very common go-to item. But when you have things like andouille, I mean, yeah, Jerry's right, the flavor of that is incredible, but if the diner doesn't know how to pronounce it, go back to a term that the consumer knows as the tag-along buddy that's gonna give umami and flavor and excitement. And then, you know, if you're in an area where you've got team members who can generate excitement for new menu items and explain it to the diner well, that's exceedingly powerful. But, you know, it's marketing, it's menu language, and it's, you know, how are you going to promote it? What's your strategy for that?
This is for anybody. What produce items have you seen in restaurants that got you excited or a little jealous?
Sunchokes. Yeah, I completely agree with Jerry, and Jerry mentioned sunchokes, and I was so excited, and everybody I was sitting with, we were all looking at each other, because that's what I was looking for at the produce show.
Sunchokes.
I was in Napa last week, and we had roasted sunchokes at a restaurant called Red, and I think that was the best thing I ate those 3 days I was in Napa.
Wow.
Very simple.
Baby dandelion. Baby dandelion is one of my
Baby
favorite
dandelion.
vegetables, and it's coming up very strong. Spent with the bagna cauda or just with the Roman anchovies and garlic sauce.
Last year here at the produce show, we discovered, not in the restaurant, at the produce show, we discovered broccoli leaves. And we contacted the company and we started using broccoli leaves and we put it in our salads and salad bars. Really, really excited about it because it's exciting for our students that they're seeing something that says broccoli, but it doesn't look like broccoli at all. And they're like looking in their salad, there's the broccoli, and there's no broccoli. It's very, very interesting, and it's an amazing product, and we're happy to use it. Goes along with what I said earlier. It used to be an agricultural waste product. And now we're leveraging it actually in our salad bars.
I love to see fruit used really in interesting ways with savory applications. It's really interesting. One of the things I did when I was at Date Essential was to analyze menus right across the country and how things are moving. And fruit is wildly under-leveraged outside of the dessert category. And so when you see a chef who can really apply fruit rather than just kind of plopping a couple of berries on a salad, but really apply it in a unique way that makes it an inherent part of a savory dish, I love that. I think it's really interesting.
As the industry observers, Amy and Maeve, could you talk a little bit about how your examples of how consumer trend information, you've seen it influence menus across the country and where that's been?
Can I answer the previous question
sure.
first?
I don't like that one.
Yeah. Let's put that one on the back burner for a minute, because I saw something on a menu earlier this year that is making me crazy. And here's the backstory. My husband and I moved 2.5 years ago. The closest restaurant is an independently owned restaurant a mile from our house. They have an extensive beer list of beers that we both love. So we often walk there so we don't have to worry about driving the mile home after too many beers. And their menu sucks. I mean, end of story. They've been through 4 owners in 2.5 years, and they can't get consistency down, but they do a couple things I love, like the blistered shishito peppers with lime juice and sea salt as a starter. It's probably the only thing they do consistently well. But this summer, they had a beer dinner with a local brewery, and the chef, who'd never done anything that impressed me, other than blister a few shishito peppers, did a roasted beet that he then marinated, that he then sliced, that he griddled in butter to get it crispy, and then the pastry chef at the restaurant did brioche buns that were buttered and griddled and with melted manchego cheese on it. And so this was the little starter at the beer dinner. And my husband took a bite of it and he goes, "This is the best burger I've ever had." And my husband is a meat-centric man. And I tentatively said, "You know, that's a beet?" And he's like, "No way." And I'm like, "Yeah." And he looked a little closer and goes, "It's delicious. I wish they'd put this on the menu." And we said that to them, and they haven't put it on the menu. But that's an example of something that made me jealous, infuriated. I mean, when you get an opportunity like that to impress a meat-centric diner with a veg-centric item, God, go with it. Don't wait. Make it happen. Okay, my rant is over. What was the other question, Ellen?
What trend information have you seen work its way onto menus?
Frickin' frackin' kale, and everybody I know, you knew I was going to go there. You know, Michael Whiteman says it's going away, and I hope he's right because I'm a known kale hater. But the more we talk about it, the more people are like, "Oh yeah, kale. Oh yeah, everybody loves kale. Oh, we should do some kale." And now everybody's doing kale. Jerry, where are you? I hope you're wrong. I hope it's going away. But sometimes the more we talk about a trend or we proclaim a trend, then it's out there as something shiny and new, and then everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that's right, we should do that." Even if it wasn't really a there, if a lot of people are talking about it, it becomes pervasive and top of mind.
Oh, what's wrong with kale?
Do you really want me to answer that? What's wrong with crunchy melon?
It's cheap, it tastes good.
Yeah, no, and you know, Amy brings up a really good point. It's this whole idea of jumping on trends just because that's what a lot of people are talking about, right? So on the one side, all this consumer information on trends can suddenly lead every single restaurant to put the same thing on their menu, whether it's relevant to what they're doing or not. And so that's the bad use of consumer information, right, and consumer insights. Now the good way is for an operator or a manufacturer or whoever it is to look at the trends and then start using consumer data on their own patrons or who their customer base is to understand, not only, I mean, obviously in your operational focus and your menu focus, is this a trend that's relevant? Do you even need, you don't need to jump on every single trend, you know what I mean? And so the best use of consumer information is to understand, is this something that will be acceptable to your patrons? Is it too trend forward? Is it too trend backward? You know, is it something that they care about? Will it be completely non-intuitive based on what they're anticipating from their experience at your operation? So I think that's an excellent use of consumer data. And you do see operators who just say, "Look, I'm not going to jump on the kale trend because that means nothing to me." Not to, you know, obviously beat up kale, the poor kale.
No, go for it.
No, but you know what I'm saying? Like any one of those things that people talk about ad nauseum and get beaten into the ground as a result of the media and social media, whatever it ends up being. Not every trend is applicable for every operator or manufacturer, and that's okay, and that's fine. You know, skip a trend if it's not relevant for you.
Well, what do you think are for the operators, the biggest challenges or frustrations you have of working with produce?
You know, for me, it's just availability. That's a big challenge, just so we can put it in all of our restaurants across the country.
How do you deal with that?
You know, we work really close with our produce suppliers. They're really helpful. They do a lot of work with us to help us source them. Some of the other things that are challenges for us, and it's kind of like your kale thing. For me, it's Brussels sprouts. You know, I love Brussels sprouts, don't get me wrong, but a lot of restaurants, when they're putting them on the menu, they deep fry them, or they roast them and deep fry them, or there's a ton of bacon on there, there's a ton of fat on there. And to me, and at CPK, we really like to showcase the vegetables first. And we do love big flavor, and we want to have a huge flavor impact, but we also want to keep our preparations very simple, and we want to get the best produce we can, and we want to prepare it in the quickest and easiest way we can to really showcase that item. So, you know, it's challenging to get that out there when sometimes your guests want everything really spicy or want a lot of fat in there. But that's something that we're kind of leaning towards. Just keep it simple and showcase that great produce.
I think the most important things for me in particular, it's on dealing with produce is logistics, trying to have everything everywhere at the same time and match the flavor that you're looking for. It's not feasible, and people say, oh, we have to be consistent everywhere. No, you don't, because the moment you start to move the vegetables, then you got to figure out, you got to pick them up at least 3 or 4 days before they are ripe, or the fruit in particular. So the quality just is not consistent. And trying to do a regional menu for certain things is even more complicated when you managing thousand restaurants in the same time. I think that we may be able to solve, at least we are testing with that, by producing salads or vegetables-centric dishes that are prepared fresh in the morning just for locality, using what's available in the region, and delivered deliver them on the same day, even when you don't have a kitchen. Only because moving vegetables is very expensive. You basically transport 90% of water. Every time you fill up a truck, it costs you $7,000 from place to place. Most important, by the time you get the products, it's not the product that you should be using to begin with. And that's why I think local is important, not for the grow part, but it's more about how do you preserve the flavors as best as you can for something that is very highly perishable. I mean, even the yield of salads goes down 10% every day you keep it in the refrigerator. And most of the time you don't sell by the weight, you sell by the look. So therefore they start to get mushy, you need more salads. And the handling. For us, the handling of the vegetables is one of the most dangerous things to do. And I think I spent the last 6 months just to devise QA procedures, with the help of the most expert. I mean, E. coli it can be all over the place. It's very stringent. It's very scary for a large company. I mean, we know about the Chipotle issue and so forth, but that can happen to everybody. How do we bring the vegetables in our kitchen? They are 100% pre-clean and pre-sanitized, because we don't want a cross-contamination with the rest of the stuff. It's a scary thing. That's the number of this.
We have some time left for questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, raise your hand. Do we have a microphone for the audience? If we don't, you just have to be extra loud when you get up. Do any of the students have a question? Yeah, the gentleman in the second row.
How do you know how much you're gonna predict this trend is gonna last, and do the farmers have to keep producing, and then all of a sudden the trend changes, and then you have to move on to another produce? Is that how that works? I mean, how do you go about making sure that it all falls into place and nobody else gets left behind because the trend just changes just like that?
I mean, you have two different, I speak for myself, large company. I mean, you have two different techniques. You can even lock price for the next 6 months or contract for a year. But if you don't want to be swiped by a trend that is not a trend, basically, you go with the market. Normally you have a good relationship with the producers. Like for us, I say, if we have to do a special for Christmas, whatever, maybe 6 months before, I said I needed, 1 million pounds of peppers, right? You can't get up on the phone and say I need 1 million pounds. Somebody's got to put the seeds in the ground. So with the vegetables, there's a lot of planning to do. Playing the market with the trends, I think maybe to say the right thing. If it doesn't apply to your concept, it's not a trend. It's a trend for somebody else. If everybody loves red curry sauce, but I have an Italian restaurant, I'm not going to put on the menu, no matter how trendy that is. But it's a little tricky. Produce is a very volatile market. As you design the dishes, even if you want to include the trend, you got to do it in such a way that you can control the risk. Because at some time, you move the market. The best thing to do for a large company, create your own trend. That way you control the market. And then I think that's what a large company should do, because you become so big that you may disrupt the market for somebody else to begin with.
Rich? There's a microphone coming to you.
So two questions. So as a distributor, we often push produce, and as an industry, we push produce for health reasons. We're trying to increase consumption. And when immediately, generally speaking, when we say increase consumption, it automatically moves to obesity, healthy America, kids eating healthier, and things like that. So 2 questions. One is, how does the healthy menu translate to you marketing it to your customers? And number 2, have you had any inclination on organics moving into the food service industry? It's primarily retail right now.
I mean, this is all you.
Yeah.
So, years ago, we actually decided that we're not marketing for health and wellness. We like to market for, our marketing is focused on flavor and taste. And the health and wellness is a byproduct of it. In the last 3 years, though, we've been incorporating health and wellness with the sustainability. What is good for you is also good for planet. And what is good for planet, incidentally, is good for you. And so that's the message in terms of the marketing of this particular segment that we've been focusing on. But here's the bigger issue. From our perspective, eating more produce, I mean, you cannot eat enough of the produce for you to become obese. I mean, that's, you should be eating even 24 hours a day if you've been eating produce. You're not
French
gonna
fries.
become-
French fries.
It's very, very difficult. We have taken our burgers. 40% of our burgers, they have 40% of our regular burgers, 4-ounce burgers now, is made of mushroom. So mushroom is inherent. And our students actually do not necessarily know or care about it. Information is available to them, but they eat that mushroom burger, not because it has mushroom in it, because it's tasty and it's delicious. It is actually a great product. It's a good experiential product for them. They eat our entrees and we are 85%, by the way, 85% of our menus is plant-based, plant-forward, plant-centric menu. We're probably the highest buyers of the beans in the campus dining across the country.
How many beans do you buy?
I'm sorry?
How many beans?
A lot of different variety of the beans, you know, not just produce, but again, when it comes up to the plant-based, we don't differentiate that at what point this was produce. Beans, you know, dried beans at one point, they were also agricultural products, you know. So they eat our entrees, they experience our food, not necessarily because they're good for them, because they're delicious. They're really, really good food.
You know, Rafi, I'd love to jump in here. You know, Rich, to your point about we want to improve public health in this country, we want to reduce rates of obesity, type 2 diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, I'll be the first to say we haven't done well using that strategy. This is good for you, just does not work. This is nutritious, this is going to promote your health. It's kind of ho-hum. And, you know, going back to, are you using more produce and delivering on flavor, possibly shifting food costs, maybe increasing labor costs? I mean, another example of this meat mushroom blend is Sodexo wanted to do it in their schools. So they serve 400 school districts across the country. And there was a lot of resistance to this for a lot of reasons, but they did testing with students, and something like 86% of students preferred the blended burger. Why? Because on a school lunch line, if that patty's gonna be held for 20, 40, 60 minutes, the mushrooms promote moisture retention and you get a better burger experience. Those elementary school kids didn't care that it was 20% mushroom. They cared that it tasted better if they were the last kid through the lunch line. So there's a lot of ways we need to look at the solutions that produce bring, and that, oh, by the way, this is better for you, almost as a whispered afterthought.
And it should be an afterthought to a certain degree. I mean, not that all food needs to be as healthy as possible, but you are seeing restaurants move away from the healthy section or the light section because that doesn't sell. You hear from every single operator that the minute they put that on there, nobody's ordering. They like it to be there to feel a little better that they have that option, and then they never order from it. But operators now are designing these dishes to be as good, as flavorful, as carefully developed as every other dish on the menu. And the fact that it might be healthier is just simply an afterthought to the quality and the preparation of that dish, which is the way it really should be, more than anything else.
I just want to jump in too. I agree with that the light menu has kind of gone away, but when you think about it, first and foremost for us, it's got to be a craveable item. It's got to drive traffic. It's got to bring people into the restaurant who just want to come and get that dish or that or the next. For us, our largest category is pizza. Thank goodness. But our second largest category are our salads and our lighter items. You know, and our light items, we don't necessarily have a special menu. They're just right in our menu. We do like a great cedar plank salmon that we roast in our pizza oven, and we're really not adding any fat to that dish at all. And it's one of our top sellers. We do power bowls with ancient grains, quinoa and farro. We have watermelon radish in there. We have a lot of really interesting ingredients in those power bowls, and those sell extremely well and are some of our top sellers in the restaurants that we have them. So for us, those healthy items are definitely very much forward. And we definitely showcase them in everything that we do in the restaurant.
You know, I think Paul just made a really great point. I'm going to say it differently, is that the restaurant industry's responsibility is to provide choice, not to preach, and to provide a menu that offers something for everyone. And, you know, again, wearing my dietitian hat, it's not the restaurant industry's responsibility to say, here's your 500-calorie lunch item because that's what you should have at lunch, but to give choice so that a diner, you know, is able to balance throughout the day the mood demands, the flavor demands, the portion demands. And yeah, we need to do a lot better job of helping people understand what calories mean in the diet. And we're getting very close to, you know, restaurants with 20 or more units having that mandatory nutrition labeling available. It'll be new in some parts of the country, and there'll be consumer awareness that'll have some changes. You know, we've had it in California since July of 2009, and there were some restaurant chains that totally revamped their menus there because sticker shock changed consumer behavior so dramatically. But we know we're also moving into a new administration and some shifts in the marketplace that could shift the consumer mindset when they're dining away from home. And okay, now I'm going down the political road. Ellen, stop me. Are we out of time?
Yes.
But anyway,
we actually are out of time.
Back to provide choice,
Oh,
but don't preach, and do it in a way that makes it appealing, selling on flavor descriptors, not this is good for you.
Okay, well, Peggy, you have a question?
Many of the produce companies have consumer and menu trend research and trend data. Is that helpful to you, and do you take advantage of it?
I would say yes, in general. As long as there's no, channel to search a direction. I mean, it's honest. Let's put it that way. But I want to go back to the fact that yeah, you're right. I mean, you can make your menus as a place to dictate, almost guide your customers. But the media plays a big part on that. The media will attack your restaurants or your dishes in the most vicious way by saying, oh, I went over there and this dish is 2,000 calories and it's blasted everywhere, that kind of stuff. So, you know, there is a balance on how you manage this calories content and so forth, and there's a trend. But, you know, especially in Europe, in general, in England, now they went from salt to go to sugar, and you have a slew of government and medias attacking you for everything they feel is a little above or something. And so we're trying to be balanced, but sometimes we are pushed by the consumers, advocates.
Ellen, I want to actually say, Peggy, your question regarding can produce industry and the forums be designed in a way to get better feedback from food service? Yes, I would say better work or better type of communication between operators. And I go back again and advocate for campus dining and college universities. We really are incubators. We can be used as incubators. If there is a way that we can communicate better with the produce industry, be it with the packers, be it with the trade magazines, be it some format of the forum where communication can be not needing translation, would be enormously beneficial in this process.
Yeah, and Peggy, one thing especially when, I know you deal with the avocado, and I had a good experience about, we don't get much feedback how to use the products, especially for large scales, directly for the people who produce it. We get marketing, research, consumer behavior and so forth. But I remember when I wanted to put up fresh avocado, and we worked together, in 200 stores overnight, the solution came directly for the grower. And he told me exactly how to do it, and how to ripe it, and how to get it delivered consistently, and get no waste about it. We don't get too much of the kind of information that can help us.
For us at CPK, do we look at the trend information? For sure. We'd be silly not to. But sometimes when you see that data, it's and it's the trend data. It's the trend might have already passed a little bit. And what we like to do at California Pizza Kitchen is kind of create those trends. So we definitely want to be ahead of it. But looking at some of that data, it definitely backs us up on some of our ideas. So.
Well, I think we're out of time. Can we give our panelists a round of applause?